Welcome back, everybody, to the Breakthrough Moment podcast. Today's special guest is Dave Pastor. Thanks for joining us today, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is a space where we interview entrepreneurs who are sharing the pivotal moments throughout their career that broke them into the next level of success. And as they share their breakthroughs, us at home can also have breakthroughs as well. And so for those of you who don't know Dave's father operated a small business. In his 20s, so he comes from an entrepreneurial background. In his 20s, he started building churches with the community. And also he built his own business. It was a carpet and upholstery business from 1 truck to 5. And over 28 years, he decided to sell it. And he walked away in 2023 with just over $1 million in cash and $500,000 in assets of real estate. And then he decided to coach other small businesses on how to do the same in their business. If you're a business owner, if you're looking to start a business or grow a business, scale a business, Dave is your man. So without further ado, Dave, let's jump into this. I'd love to know, what was your biggest breakthrough moment throughout your career?
All right, yeah. Well, there's probably a lot of little moments that led up to this, but this is a moment where things really, really shifted in my company. So this is the carpet and upholstery cleaning business that I started. It was probably I was probably into it for about 5 years, and somewhere between 5 and 7 years. And, I knew from the beginning that the work that I did, I was going to do, I wanted to do high-end homes, and target high-end customers. And so, we eventually got there, but, starting out, I knew how to do the work and I knew how to do it really well. And growing up working for my dad in a small business, I knew how to treat customers and have good customer service. And so I was doing this, the work we were doing was really good, but I wasn't charging enough. So we had a lot of business and we grew really fast. Because people loved the work we did, and it was it was way too cheap, and so I ended up hiring, purchasing more vehicles and hiring more people, and we ended up growing without really building well. I had guys working for me that, like I said, I knew how to do the work, but I didn't know much about running a business, and so the guys I hired, they weren't the right people. But basically, it became a lot of chaos. There was just, I naively assumed that they were going out and doing the work the way I had taught them. But we were getting a lot of complaints, and so we were having, and we guaranteed our work. So we had to go back out and do that work again. So I'm already not charging enough. Now I'm paying overtime for these guys to go back out, and I'm going with them. And I'm working 60 to 70 hours a week, and I'm losing money. And so, it all built up to say, okay, this has to change. I can't keep doing this. And I got some things figured out, and and there were things that I probably knew along the way, but I wasn't. When you have that much growth that fast, it's just so hard to keep up with everything. I just didn't do a good job making sure everything, was being followed the way I wanted it to. So I scheduled a meeting for the whole company one morning, and, for the following week. And in the meantime, I got all of our SOPs, our policies and procedures, everything written out, and went over everything with everybody in the meeting. I said, "Hey, we're running into problems. This is how I always wanted it to be, but these things are not getting done the way they need to get done. And starting today, this is how everything is going to be done." And, I wrote out everything from, this is how you need to pull up to the customer's home. This is how you need to walk to their front door. I was a micromanager and an anal retentive all rolled into one. It was probably pretty hard to accept for most people, but everything had spun out of control. I just swung way too hard to the other way. But I had to. And so I told everybody, I said, look, I know that this is going to be hard, and I know that you guys haven't been doing this, so everybody is fired. And I fired everybody right there. And yeah, and I told seven of the people, I said, hey, I would like to hire you back. Before you leave today, I'd like to hire you back. And you other five, you're gone, you know. And so two of the seven that I told I wanted to hire, they said, no, I quit. And they didn't want to be hired back. So
Oh,
I had five out of the 12 people that I had, and we were going to move forward from there. And over the next 2 months, all but one of those people quit. And so I was down to one guy. And I mean, we worked so hard because it ended up being right at our busy season. And he and I just did everything we could to get all the work done for all of our clients. And he was great. He was so happy I fired everybody because he was like me in that he wanted it done right. Like he loved serving customers and he loved doing the work where when he was done, they were like, oh my gosh, this is great. And so he was built that way. And that was a learning experience for me is that I need to hire people like him who are just naturally gonna, you train them, and teach them how to do it the way it needs to be done, but they want to do it the way it needs to be done. That was such a good learning experience. But when the busy season got done, it drops off and there's almost no business, for a couple, months. And so I just told him, his name was Felix. I said, hey, go home, enjoy your family. You thanked him for his hard work. I said, take the next 2 weeks off. I'll pay you for it. You just enjoy being at home, because I knew it was going to be slow. We're not going to really miss much. So we did that. And then from there, I hired people that, resembled what this guy had, where he wanted to do it right. He loved serving people, that was, you could pay him minimum wage and he would still do a great job. And so I ended up building the company back up by making sure the people I hired were, the right people, that they had this, that type of personality that loved serving others. And that if I got fooled in the interview, I hired them quick or fired them really quick afterwards because, it just, I knew enough to know this isn't going to work out and I'm going to do us both a favor.
so what success did came as a result of that?
Right. So I ended up, the other thing that I ended up doing was realizing, we can't do it all. So I think I about tripled my prices, and so we were now profitable, and we were, the work we were doing. We lost a lot of the customers that were complaining, a lot that were difficult to work for, because those when you raise your prices, people who want really good service are willing to pay for it. And I was just charging way too little. So we actually became profitable. And what ended up happening is it also created a culture where everybody that hired saw the culture that was just between, me and this one guy. And that started the culture where everybody, learned, okay, this is how we do it. And then the guys just built on that culture, and the culture went from toxic to being great, and it was just so much easier. And then at that point, I was able to say, you know what, hey, these guys are doing things the way they need to be done. So I set up a bonus program to reward them for doing it right, but it gave them something to shoot for on their own. And we created a bonus program. They went after sales that they normally wouldn't go after, and the business just grew from there. And so I didn't have to worry about training anybody anymore. I could put new hires with any one of these three guys that that came, right at the beginning of me firing everybody. I could put with any one of them and have confidence that they're going to train them because they were part of building that culture. They wanted to protect it, so they made sure that everybody that got trained was a good fit.
That's really interesting. We hear culture being one of the most sticky, most important things for long-term success in a business. What was it about the culture that you started with that one other team member? What was it about what you were doing that was so magnetic to the new team?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and one of the interesting thing is that I didn't really create the culture. I mean, I said this is the way I wanted it done, but then because I had the right people, they started building the culture and saying, hey, they would call each other when they finished their jobs and say, do you need any help? I'll come help you, and then that became part of the culture where nobody felt like they were getting left out on a job and, work until, late at night. They knew they'd have backup. And then that just became what you did. I didn't tell anybody that that's what you had to do, and then just getting their equipment ready in the morning and getting everything set up. They'd help one another if one guy's van needed a lot more work than the other guy. Instead of just leaving and heading out to do their work, they helped each other so that they could head out together. So it just created this culture that stuck, and it was because I had the right people.
It sounded like there was very little ego. Like for the team to want to help the other team when they could have gone off back home to rest after the day, but they're going to help the other team. That requires a lot of, you know, a low level of ego and just like hey, I really want to help. A lot of contribution and heart was there. So that's really great to see. What advice would you have for other entrepreneurs who maybe their culture isn't clicking, or maybe their systems and SOPs aren't working effectively? What advice would you have for those business owners?
Yeah. Um, I think what you've got to do, or what I did that was really helpful, is as the business grew, I I let them create the SOPs, uh, you know, so that they would own it. At some point, everybody had a camera on their phone, a and I said, look, take take video footage of exactly how you're doing this and how you think it should be done, and our next meeting. Let me back up. So I started having morning meetings every single morning, and then the guys would, and I would say, hey, we need to create something for this. Who wants to do that? And so they had cameras on their phones. They would say, show me the video, and then I could write it up, but they could say, this is how, we like doing it, and this is when, customers seem to be really happy when we do this, and so it became, I mean, if you create something, you own it, and so that was huge. But having those morning meetings really was crucial to having a culture that grew and stayed positive. Because you could, everybody turn, talk. It wasn't just about numbers, where it's like you're talking about sales and you're talking, we had company wide goals that if we hit this goal, everybody gets a bonus, and then everybody had a way to get an individual bonus as well. But so they were pretty excited to see that number grow and to know what they needed to do that day. Um, but for me as the owner, I could see where a guy who is normally, you know, contributes to the meeting, and he comes in and he's being quiet, I can pull him aside after the meeting and go, hey, you know, what's going on? You seem like you're a little distracted this morning. And then you find out, well, his wife's dog died the night before, and she was wanting him to get off early, and he's now got a huge schedule. Whereas if I didn't have that meeting, I wouldn't know that, and I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. But knowing that, I can say, hey, you know what? Let me see if I can get some things rearranged and get you home early today.
Okay.
And it just it just made everything flow so much smoother. That 15-20 minute meeting, just because a lot of times their personality as a technician is they're going to work hard, they're going to get, and they don't even think to say, my wife's dog died. Can I get off early today? Like they're good hard workers, and so you're able to not let any sort of resentment or whatever that could build up. It just doesn't ever build up.
Yeah. So it sounded like the culture was also a reflection of yourself. You were genuinely wanting to support, you were genuinely wanting to help people. And I guess they felt that and then wanted to reciprocate it to the team or other people. That seems like that created a lot of the culture there as well, which is fantastic. Now, I'm super curious. You started a podcast, right? Or a blog called I Hear Dead People.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you started building churches in your 20s. So, what role has your faith been throughout your business journey?
Yeah, well, it's everything really. It's a huge part of it, and I've never liked being like this religious guy, who because it just felt really narrow. Um, but I've been a seeker, where I realized that you know that there is a God who created this world, and I want to know about him, and I want to know how to live in a way where I'm participating in what he's doing because I haven't always done that. I without that awareness, I lived pretty selfish life in my late teens, early 20s. But you know with because the more you go down that road, the more you realize that there is a God, and the more you begin to value things differently. So success in business for me was it always had to be a win-win-win. Where whatever we did, it had to be good for the customer, it had to be good for the company, and it had to be good for the employees. If any one of those it wasn't going to work for them, we had to find another way. Because uh, you can't have something that's just good for the customer, good for the company, but the employees suffer, or it's good for the employees, good for the company, but it's not that great for the customer. Like that's not something I want to engage in. And so I feel like pursuing a relationship with God and trying to live into what God does and how he brings goodness into the world, it's difficult to engage in something that's not good that doesn't bring that same goodness, that's just good for me or just good for my employees, but, not good for everybody.
So important. I can resonate with all that 100%. So then how did you start this blog? And why did you call it I Hear Dead People? No
Yeah.
offense. It's a great name. It's a catchy name.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I Hear Dead People is most of the people I read, most of the books I read, and the scriptures are written by dead people. So that's
Love
where
it.
the name comes from. But yeah, I've just really gotten into in the past 5, 10 years. A lot of these books were written by people, hundreds of years ago, that are just dense with, spiritual truth, and they're hard to read. You could read a page, and it takes me like I could stay on one page for a day or two, just trying to really, figure out what this guy's saying. But I had a lot of people. I started this when I mean, I got baptized in my 20s, and I remember someone had shown me what they do in the mornings. They write down their thoughts after reading scripture, and I thought, oh, I guess that's what every Christian does, so that's what I should do. And so I started doing it, and I've been doing it for over 30 years now. And so anyway, a lot of time there've been several friends over the years that would say, I'd share some things that I'd written down or whatever, and they would say, "Man, you should write a book. You need to write a book." And so I I don't think I'll ever write a book. So I said, well, I'll start a blog, and if you want to read my thoughts, I'll just post them up there. So I don't edit them much. It's just really pretty much what I meditated on that day. Sometimes I'll go back and go, you know what, I could say that a little better, or it becomes a little clearer, so I'll change it. But it's pretty much an online journal is what I consider it to be.
How many blog posts do you have?
Well, I started about 2 years ago. So there's probably over 100, I would say.
There's your book right there, Dave. It's just you just go, my Bible reviews or my Bible, notes or something.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's 100 pages right there. So that's interesting. Share with us that process again. So you read some of the Bible, and then you just do some journaling. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah. So you know, there's something called the lectionary that more Orthodox Catholic type churches will follow that. And it's scripture readings for the week. So if you're a Catholic church or if you follow the lectionary, everybody's reading those same scriptures. So I kind of like that. It's sort of like this collective mind, that's created with that. And so I started doing that, and which kind of keeps me and what I would like to read or focus on out of it. And I just read these, the verses that are picked out, and then just, question it and see how it hits me and see how it applies to what I'm doing in life. And, and sometimes I don't know where it's going to go when I sit down, but I just, none of it, I have no training, so none of it is I don't claim that all of it is theologically sound. It's just my thoughts and the way it makes sense to me. And I try to be theologically sound, as to the best I know how to be, um, but I think theologians would probably want to point out that I'm not. But
I think that's a really great method. So you're saying, like, there's a website here, Lectionary. Do you have a specific website that you go to? This is like lectionarypage.net.
that's it. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Oh, all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so then every day it's a brand new Bible verse. Is that right?
Um, every day, no, it's week by week. So
Oh, yeah.
and then sometimes there's some different ones for different days, but it's pretty much week by week, and there's usually an Old Testament passage, a psalm, or a proverb or something like that. A one of Paul's writings, and then one of the Gospels. So you usually get four.
Got a full calendar here, month by month, and it's like
Yeah.
a great way to get structured. And I think the actual journaling or the reflection afterwards is a great way just to conceptualize it in your own words, in your own way, and so you can understand it. Because sometimes it's like poetry reading the Bible. It's quite so confusing sometimes for me. I've
Yeah.
actually been
Yeah.
listening to a whole bunch of podcasts, and then from my podcast, or when I go to church, I'll take notes, and then those notes I'll put into AI and the Bible verse, what it's talking about, and I'll get it to summarize it back to me so I can easily understand it. And
Yeah.
I think that process for me, because it's all about the wording and the relevancy for me. Is like, how does that relate to today? How can I reflect for myself? How can I challenge my views? How can I support what I'm currently doing? Like, it's been quite useful to reflect back through AI. Who'd have thought
Yeah.
that it's accelerated my learning a lot, as well as reading the Bible, of course. And so my next question is, how do you then choose what to write about in your blog?
Yeah. I usually just, if something hits me while I'm reading it, usually like a thought will come while I'm reading it and reading through the different passages, and I'll think, oh, that kind of reminds me of this, and then I'll just start writing and see where it goes, and I do use AI, as well. I don't like to use it for my final thing that I say, but I'll say, hey, I've got a blog, and I'd like to write. Here are my thoughts. What do you think? And I'll get some feedback. It's like having a friend. Just give you some
Totally.
feedback,
Yeah.
and then sometimes there's I like it because it'll help me cite scriptures that go along with what I'm saying. And some I recently I put something up there, and the Book of Revelation is pretty hard to figure out, to say the least. And so, the prompt I gave it was, hey, I really would like an intelligent understanding of what's going on here. I know that there's a lot of doomsday preachers that make it sound like you have to crack the code and figure out when the end of time is coming. I don't want any of that. I want, solid theologians that have, that understand this book, from a historical perspective and understand what, you know, apocrypha writings are, and and tell me what they would say is going on here, and that was really helpful.
And just for everyone at home, to help them understand what are the apocrypha writings?
So so think of it like if you're thinking of going to a movie, right? And somebody says, "Well, what do you want to see? Do you want to see a comedy?" Nah, kind of more in the mood for an action adventure. And they're like, I don't really want that. I was thinking of, maybe it's your girlfriend and she's like, well, I want a romantic comedy, and, or, well, let's do a feel good movie. So there's different genres, but when oh, this is a horror movie, well, you sort of know what to expect, and you sort of know, like, okay, this is how this is going to go. And when they have this scene where the person's going down in the basement and there's no light, you're like, oh yeah, this is not going to end well. And so you think of apocrypha writings as like a genre, like that's how it's understood. That this is not meant to be taken literally. Everything is symbolic of this, because no one has ever seen God, no one's ever seen heaven, no one. So it's not meant to be taken literally. It's painting you this picture, like in Revelation, it's painting this picture of this, good versus evil, and this battle that happens. And then there is some things that you can figure out, a lamb that looks as if it had been slain. Well, that's probably Jesus. I mean, but that's a poetic way of saying it, is that, he was the Lamb of God and he died on a cross. So that's probably him. But when you know that you're dealing with these visions of things that are too grand for words, then you're just getting a sense that this is a battle between good and evil, and it's telling us to hold on. It's worth it. The fight is worth it, because in the end, good wins. Sort of like watching Lord of the Rings. None of that's real. But you see this battle between good and evil. And it's and it's entertaining, but it's inspiring. It makes you want to fight for whatever good there is.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, Wikipedia says they're biblical or related writings not formally part of the accepted canon of Scripture, some of
I'm
which.
sorry. Yeah, that's apocrypha. I meant apocalyptic. I'm sorry.
Oh, apocalyptic.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
like
okay.
the end of the world type stuff. Yeah, I knew when I said apocrypha, I knew that didn't sound right.
Oh, no worries, no
Yeah.
worries.
Yeah.
That's
They're
cool.
not part of the can. Apocrypha is writings that aren't considered part of the Bible.
Okay, I'm new to that topic. I'm still kind of learning this. I watched a podcast on it, and but yeah, the so much to learn here. So that's interesting. So you do your Bible study, and then you do some journaling, and from that journaling, you create a blog post if you feel that it's of value.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Um, and how does this all relate to business? Let's connect the dots there, because I liked what you said there. Is it's like, um, yeah, making it relevant for you. Business is important to you, and you do obviously business coaching and helping businesses, and business owners. So how do you make the connection there? That's what I'm really curious about.
Well, you know, I don't really make a connection intentionally.
Okay.
Um, I think it just that is a part of who I am, and you know, in what you mentioned before about the culture is sort of part, comes from who I am. I think, company culture, I think that a business is, I mean, I think every business, the way it is and the way it's run is a reflection of the owner. I mean, it really is. It's difficult to separate the personality, the face of that business from who the owner really is. And so, I think what it, when you try to put into practice the things that Jesus teaches and, the things that you see God doing, in the world that are, you know, bringing in love and goodness and, and love your neighbor and, then then you want to, your business, you want it to be a place where that is lived out, and it's not like I felt really strongly against like, well, I'm only going to hire Christians because I just felt like that's probably illegal to discriminate, but but it wasn't really for that reason. It was like, well, that just I want the company to reflect the values, because that's the kind of company that it is, and and I believe that people can reflect those values even if they're not intentional about Jesus. I think there's good people out there that can reflect that God's working in all of us, and who knows, what that will lead this person to. It could lead to a curiosity in them that would help them discover, who God is, and that can become meaningful to them.
Mm-hmm. It's it's a process. It's a journey, absolutely journey, and it sounds like you're in it. And so I'm curious now, when you're talking to businesses, um, and you've been doing it. It's in your blood, right? From before
Right.
you were
Yeah.
born with your dad. Like you live and breathe this, and you're adding in the spiritual component, which is fantastic. What do you find are some of the biggest mistakes business owners make today?
Yeah. I think probably one of the ones that probably the biggest thing, and I learned it early on, is being, they're not easy to do business with. And I think if you just grab hold of that and put that in everything you do, you know, to be easy to do business with, it'll change, everything that you're about, and it became everything, like one of the things that people didn't like about cleaning their carpet was, that when we left, they had wet carpet, and so, their kids are coming home from school and they'd have to stay off until it dried. So we use these high powered dryers that blew across the surface of the carpet. So a good bit of the home would be dry by the time we were done, and we just made it a lot easier for people, when they hired us. So, you know, uh, everything from that to even the headset that we wore, like our CSRs, when they answered the phone, they had a Bluetooth headset, and we made sure we got the one that gave the sound the best. The microphone was the best. The headphone, the earbuds were, because if someone has to work and say, and you're like, I'm sorry, ma'am, what did you say? And your voice doesn't sound good and you can't hear them well, now you're making them work to do business with you. They got to repeat themselves. So it may seem like a small detail, but it's just one more way that you're making it easy to do business with. I, I've never understood companies that say, oh, if you're going to use a credit card, there's a 3% charge. It's like, Well, using a credit card is everybody uses a credit card now. We started using them because it made it convenient for people. It made it easier for them rather than writing a check. They could just swipe their card. Um, if you really feel like you want them to pay the credit card fees, just raise your price. And don't tell them, don't insult people and say, well, we don't want to be more convenient for you, but if you want that, you're going to pay for it. Like that's just what a horrible message to send people. So, just raise your price and then give them a discount for cash if you want to, but any way that you can make it easier for people to do business with you, you're gonna beat your competitors every time. Um, so I think that's just one of those pillars of just a way of thinking that should be in everything you do. You know.
For sure, for sure. It's all about the customer. And I know that goal setting is quite an important part of what you do with your clients. You have a powerful eulogy exercise you've mentioned to me as well. So how does that work? That sounds like a really really powerful exercise.
Oh, it is. It really is. So, yeah, and goal setting was one of the parts of the culture of the company too. We would take a whole day every year, and we would set goals as a company. All the employees would look at what we wanted to achieve that year, and then they would look at their own personal goals of what they wanted to achieve outside of business, and then we would have a plan, and everybody would work on their plan, and so goal setting became a part of that culture. And one of the things that I realized is extremely difficult for everybody, but it's crucial to setting your goals is figuring out what you want. Like that sounds like such a simple question, but when you get down to it, a lot of times people set goals because they think it's what they should want, or they think it's what would make people be impressed with them or whatever, but it's not really connected to who they are. And so it's a really difficult question to ask. I don't know if you've ever tried it, if you've sat there and just thought, what do I really want out of life? What makes me happy? What gives meaning to my life? It takes time. You really have to sit with that for a while. And but I find that this thing that I created, which a lot of other people have created a eulogy exercise, but the way I created it, um, it just hit me one morning to do this, and I feel like it's really powerful if you do it this way. So what you do is you imagine that you are driving along and boom, you get hit by a truck and you're dead. Just this happened today. And your best friend who knows you more than anybody else writes your eulogy and gives it to everybody. And that eulogy is all the things you left unsaid, all the dreams you left undone, all the things that this person knew about you, but knew either because you were fearful you wouldn't say this, or you were, you let doubt hold you back from actually doing some of the things you want. And, so a lot of that's mentioned in the eulogy of where you kind of stopped short in life and didn't achieve what you wanted to achieve. And then you wake up and that was just a dream. But you had that dream because you went to the doctor earlier that day and found out you only have 5 years to live. So now you rewrite your eulogy as if you died 5 years from now and what you would do in that time and how your life changed. And that's where you really see what you really want, what's really important. You go over what people say about you and and the change you made in those 5 years and how you did this or gave generously towards this or whatever you start seeing what's really important to you, and it's incredibly powerful. You could spend an hour on it, you could spend 2 days on it, but um but when you're done you're going to find out exactly what's important to you, and you will go back to it again and again. And I read mine every couple months to be reminded of what is important to me, how I want to impact other people's lives. And, and making a lot of money is not that important. I mean, it's helpful. It really is. It does help me do a lot of the things that I want to do. But that's the reason that I would like to make it, is so that I can do the things that I would like to do that help other people. It's really not about having things. It's more about becoming something.
It's not about having things, it's about becoming something. Amazing. That's a write down, everyone. And so powerful exercise. Amazing. That's super powerful. Thank you for that. What would be your most important message from today? What would you love everyone at home who's listening to really take away from today's talk?
That is a really good question. Um, you know, I lived for a long time without a whole lot of direction. And you know, I, not that I did anything all that bad, but I settled. I just looked at what was right in front of me and thought, oh, this might be fun to do. Or I, since this is in front of me, I guess I'll do this. And so, and that's how I handled school. That's how I handled working a job. And and when I started learning about, or just noticing other people that had direction, and maybe they had people in their lives, maybe their parents were different and set them on a direction, or they had a teacher that really guided them, or whatever. They were moving in the direction they wanted their life to go in. And I think we all have a direction we want our life to go in, but we're not aware that we can pick that direction, and life will bend to our will, when we're willing to believe in it, and then just start doing the things that it takes to do that. And it takes a lot of work. But it takes a lot of work to just follow along, to just settle and live that life too. They're equal amounts of work. And so, I think you can live in a way that you want to live. You don't have to settle. I mean, everybody suffers, everybody has problems, things come up, that happens to all of us. But that's not all that life is about. That's going to happen whether you're just settling for what comes along or whether you're pursuing your dreams.
That's really powerful. So, what would be the challenge? If you could challenge everybody around direction for them to do this week, this month, this year, what would be that challenge around, say, direction, if that's the challenge?
Yeah. The direction starts with knowing what you want. So, I can send it to you. You can include a link to it or whatever you want, but that eulogy exercise is probably the most powerful thing that somebody can do if they want to find direction. It really is. So I would, and the challenge would be to take it seriously. I mean, to really, put your time into it. And if you do that and you are not moved to tears reading your own eulogy, you did it wrong. Well, I don't know that there's a right, I don't want to say there's a right way or wrong way, but you should be. It should change your life. And if it doesn't, call me and let's talk and figure out what's blocking that. Because
I'm going to link that around this video, guys. Please get in touch with Dave. Dave, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your pearls of wisdom. Thank you for sharing your process with the Bible and how you relate that to business and all the different tips there. How can people get in touch with you, and who do you help? Who is your perfect client?
Yeah, so I really love working with small to medium-sized business owners, because I know the pain they're going through. I know that frustration of wanting to get things done, and yet you end up spending the day putting out fires and you can't seem to get any traction on your goals. And I love working with business owners and helping them get a plan, think strategically, and get moving down the road towards their goals. Though, I'll work with anybody that wants to accomplish their goals, but I know the pain that small business owners are going through. So the best way to get in touch with me, you can email me at dpastor@yourgoalmind.com. That's yourgoalmind.com. And my phone number is another way you can reach out to me. It's 205-283-6017. And give me a call. We'll set up a time where we can take a look at what's going on in your life. And I'd love to see if I can help you figure out a plan.
Excellent. Get in touch with Dave, everybody. If you got value from this podcast, please share, send it to others. We look forward to hearing you share your experience with other people. Take something from today and share that with one other person. That's how knowledge and the world gets better each and every day. As Dave has shared his breakthroughs, we can go out there and have our breakthroughs as well. So, Dave, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. This was great.